We need to find a belief system because we were not made to live on the downstairs level of this double-decker universe.
As time rolls on, people are going to understand the need to have some sort of divine structure to things, some sort of belief.
Maybe Joe Rogan is some kind of bellwether.
Yeah, it's a f***ed up world we live in. We need Jesus.
Hi, I'm Glenn from Speak Life. We like to see all things through the lens of Jesus, including Joe Rogan's faith journey. He used to say things like this.
Religion, I've always felt, is like a nice scaffolding for people. It's almost like it's structured to make the idiots have a really simple moral path.
And this?
If there is some all-knowing entity that is controlling everything and is filled with love and has a grand plan for the universe, they have yet to show themselves.
And this?
Everyone who practices a religion is an atheist. You're just an atheist in regards to Zeus or Apollo.
Or the 999 other gods.
Yes,
right,
and
yes.
that's a home run.
And even this.
I was watching Colbert, and they were sitting around talking about what it means to be a Catholic. I was like, what? What the f*** are you talking about? Like, hit the brakes. Aren't you grown adults? Like, you're into nonsense?
But over the years, Joe Rogan has had people on his show who have had a respect for religion, and Joe seems to have had a respect for them. And so when Jordan Peterson speaks about the Bible, that has a certain sway.
The Bible is the precondition for the manifestation of truth, which makes it way more true than just true. It's a whole different kind of true. And I think this is not only literally the case, factually, I think it can't be any other way. It's the only way we can solve the problem of perception.
Or when he speaks about the cross, that was a particularly powerful time.
You see death, you see destruction, pain, terror, tyranny, frailty, betrayal. Look harder. Look harder. Look harder. What do you see? The death and resurrection. You look far enough into the abyss, you see the light.
Other things have been happening in his life and in the culture, but now Joe Rogan is saying some very different things about faith, like in this conversation with a co-presenter, Aaron Rodgers.
But don't you think there has to be some sort of field of value that can orient people into like, hey, let's do things a little bit better because these things actually matter. There is right and wrong. There is morality.
So what is the wake-up call to having a faith conversation? For Aaron Rodgers and Joe Rogan, it's actually the whole area of morality. Because we've been living with a story ever since the Enlightenment that facts are one thing and values are another thing, and let's go for the objective level of facts and knowledge, and not the subjective level of belief and the interior world and your private spirituality. And so ever since the 17 and 1800s, we've been thinking about the world as split between the natural and the supernatural. And we've privileged the natural over the supernatural to the point where we find supernatural truth claims to be bizarre and absurd. Whereas now we're recognizing that actually, if you just privilege the natural over the supernatural, then you privilege facts over values, and you lose the whole vocabulary of value, of morality, of right and wrong. So for a lot of people, a way into a supernatural conversation is not by discussing miracle claims, for instance, but it is by looking at the supernatural values that you and I hold. Nowadays, we believe things very strongly, but we cannot prove them logically or demonstrate them under laboratory conditions. But what do you call such things that are not scientifically observable and yet you strongly believe them? Well, I guess you could call them supernatural things. And that's where Aaron Rodgers and Joe Rogan go.
Well, unfortunately, the problem with living in a secular society and living in a society that has a lot of people that are atheists, that have no belief system at all, is you find a belief system.
Why? Why do you find a belief system? You find a belief system because we are ineradicably religious. We are people who are made for a bigger story and not simply the natural realm of just the facts, ma'am, right? We need to find a belief system because we were not made to live on the downstairs level of this double-decker universe. We were not made to be simple naturalists. We need that level of meaning. We need that level of belief. And the splitting aside of facts and values has not served us as human beings. We were not made for this.
And that's a lot of these people that call themselves atheists, or they've subscribed to the religion of woke. You know, their God is equity and inclusiveness.
So notice, he's talked about atheists and he's talked about the woke. And you can listen to Justin Briley's The Surprising Rebirth of Belief in God to see how the atheist movement kind of split into atheists and atheist plus. Because for some, like the Richard Dawkins figures of the world, they are able to live just on the ground floor, or they say they're able to live just on the ground floor and not go up to the level of values. But others find that kind of existence meaningless and so go for a higher level of purpose and meaning, and that brings in values. And what values are you going to go for? Well, in a post-Christian society, what values could you go for apart from some Christian-ish values? Values like diversity and equity and inclusion, which are all profoundly Christian-ish. And if you don't believe me, you can read my book, The Air We Breathe. But they are profoundly Christian-ish in their orientation, but trying to divorce themselves from the Christian story and actually trying to divorce themselves from nature. And so we now have some very profound supernatural beliefs that are divorced from any of their roots in Christianity, but also from any roots in actual biology, chemistry, and physics. And so we're at this interesting juncture where some people are trying to live the atheist story, others are kind of going upstairs, but it's a very authoritarian value structure that people are trying to impose, which is why Joe Rogan calls it a religion, the woke religion, as he calls it.
Their God is this ideology that they think that you have to subscribe to. And that's why it's spooky, because people, human beings seem to have a very strong desire for some sort of order and form and some sort of pattern that they can follow that seems to be the right way to go.
You can't live without a story. You cannot make sense of your life without a story. I can't tell you why to get out of bed tomorrow unless I can put it into a narrative. Well, how much more is that the case for a whole culture? But we've got a whole culture that we are telling you are just biological survival machines clinging to an insignificant rock, hurtling through a meaningless universe towards eternal extinction. Cool story, bro? That's not a cool story. If I told you, let's meet at the town hall at 2 o'clock tomorrow, you're going to ask me the question, why? What's going to happen when we meet tomorrow at 2 p.m.? And if I say, well, just show up tomorrow and make your own meaning, guess what? You're not going to show up at 2 p.m. tomorrow at the town hall. You need a meaning, you need a purpose. And if you need a purpose, just in order to figure out what you're going to do in 24 hours' time, how much more do you need a purpose for the whole of your life? All of us need a reason to do something as inconsequential as meet me at the town hall tomorrow at 2 p.m. You need a reason for that. But so many people who need a reason for that, they don't have a reason for the whole thing. Well, of course they don't have a reason for the whole thing. There's no story in which they fit. They're just gene replicators. It's not a story in which they can find significance and meaning.
And they can be led. They can be led by cults. They can be led by groups of people. They can be led by, intolerant governments and evil armies and corrupt politicians. They can be led.
They can be led because what are human beings like? Are we the captain of our fate, the master of our souls? Are we like that? Are we these independent individuals who are just choosing and autonomous and sovereign? Is that what we're like? Certainly the Enlightenment tried to tell us, don't believe in a horrible thing like original sin. That's what the church tells you. The church will tell you that you're dependent and you need a savior. No, you are independent. Well, we're discovering that we are not these independent captains of our own souls. Of course we can be led. The only question is, who are we going to be led by? The Bible keeps on saying we're like sheep, which is like the least independent-minded kind of animal that it could speak of. I mean, sheep are just dumb. And sheep will follow one another off a cliff. A sheep needs a shepherd, okay? And that's what we need. And Christ comes and he says, I am the good shepherd. And he doesn't say, I've come to unleash in you your potential to be leaders in your own right, okay? He says, you are easily led, but I am the leader you are made for.
But I think as time rolls on, people are going to understand the need to have some sort of divine structure to things, some sort of belief in the sanctity of love and of truth.
We need some kind of belief in the sanctity, okay, the holiness, the set-apartness of love and truth. And what he's speaking about there, I don't think it's not just, love and groovy vibes, okay? This is not just let's all be hippies and have lava lamps. The sanctity of love means actually the sanctity of human persons. and their inviolable worth and dignity. And you need to have that kind of sense. And we have inherited that sort of sense from Christianity, that each person is an image of God. And it's Christianity that's given us this sense of the human, because not only did God make humans in his own image, God the Son became a human forevermore, and through death and resurrection exalted the human to the highest place. And the human will have the highest place on into eternity in Christianity. We need not just an abstract sense of love and truth. We need the concrete sense of the human. And where else are we going to get that sense of the human apart from Christianity?
And a lot of that comes from religion.
Not just any religion, it comes from Christianity.
A lot of people's moral compass and the guidelines that they've used to follow to live a just and righteous life has come from religion. And unfortunately, a lot of very intelligent people, they dismiss all of the positive aspects of religion because they think that the stories are mere superstitious fairy tales, that they have no place in this modern world, and we're inherently good, and your ethics are based on your own moral compass, and we all have one. And
these are all things that Joe Rogan has said over the years.
Because you see the way people behave in war, they don't have any moral compass. They're
Yep.
just murderers and killers, we've asked people in service of our country to go to these places and behave like murderers and killers, and then reintegrate into society. Right back into society and be a good person again. And they don't know how to do it, and they go crazy. And there's a lot of them.
I'm not 100% sure why he's gone to this particular example, but what I take from this particular example is that you can take any individual and plug them into a certain story, and they will not only witness things, but find themselves doing things that they would have never imagined in their wildest imaginations. Are we simply these autonomous, good, independent human beings who can go off and live righteously in the world without being plugged into a bigger story? And I think what I'm getting from Joe's story about soldiers here is that you can take individuals from very good families and from very civilized societies and put them into a story in which they behave like absolute animals. And what a crying shame that we've made certain people do that. But doesn't it also say that it's not just them, it's all of us? This is what the human heart is like, and therefore the Enlightenment story about humanity is probably nonsense.
A lot of them who come back, and they're down is up and up is down. They don't know what the
We don't help them out.
We don't help them out.
At all.
And the suicide rate, suicide is is it the number one killer of veterans?
Pretty sure.
It's tragic. Tragic.
Yeah, but
Yeah, it's a fucked up world we live in. We need Jesus.
Man, we need Jesus. We need Jesus. Of course we need Jesus. And he's not just saying, we need some kind of abstract morality at that point. Notice he reaches for the language of Jesus himself. He doesn't reach for the language of just spirituality, just religion, just some kind of civilizational Christianity even. We need Jesus himself. I love in Matthew chapter 9, verse 36, Jesus looks out at the crowd. They're like sheep without a shepherd. And then he teaches them, and he feeds them, and of course later on he saves them. This is what we need. We need Jesus himself, who comes and he gives an inviolable worth and dignity to the human, the sanctity of love and truth. Jesus is love himself. He is the truth with a capital T. And he is the one who comes to be our shepherd, who walks through the valley of the shadow of death with us and at our head, and suffers that death for us and rises up again to give us hope. Right? And he's going to talk about hope in this clip because, the secular story is not a hope-filled story. It's a story of being lost. It's a story of you can run away from the church household that is behind you, and you can go off into the far country, but the money runs out, because in Luke chapter 15, Jesus tells exactly that story. The money runs out, and you find yourself in a pigsty, and you went for freedom, and you ended up lost. But there's only one person who's come to find us, right? Only one person has come to find us. It's Jesus himself. Joe Rogan, I don't know if he's speaking better than he knows here, but he puts his finger on our real need, and it's not just for a spirituality or a religion. It's for Jesus.
I think for real.
For
If
real.
he came back now, it'd be great. Like Jesus,
Yeah.
if you're thinking about coming back,
right now?
Now's a good time.
He looks at the camera at that point. It's like, Jesus, if you're watching, you're like, now's the time. A world that is not ready for the second coming of Jesus might be asking for Jesus prematurely. I think the world really needs to take seriously the first coming of Jesus, to take the human condition onto himself. He's like the shepherd who in Luke chapter 15 hoists the lost sheep onto his shoulders and marches home. We need Jesus himself. And that then gives a dignity to the human, and it gives a hope to the human story. We need the first coming of Jesus, and then, yes, if we have sufficiently understood the first coming of Jesus, then we're ready for the second coming. But don't get ahead of yourself, Joe. Okay, you need the first coming of Jesus and to really receive him to begin with.
Yeah.
Now's a good time. We're kind of
Well, there's a lot of people that think that might be coming.
But this is the only time when you're going to want and call out for Jesus is when you think you're in a pit and when you think you're completely stuffed, okay? That is the only time when you're going to, no one looks up until they're flat on their backs. And maybe societally, this is what it takes. And maybe Joe Rogan is some kind of bellwether. He was the younger son, marching out into the far country and bad-mouthing the family homestead on his way. There's a famine in the country, and he's found himself in a pigsty, and now flat on his back he's saying we need Jesus. Is he a bellwether for what's happening in our society? You let me know what you think in the comments. We here at Speak Life are keeping our ear to the ground on what's happening culturally, and if you're starting to wonder whether Jesus might be the real deal, if you are starting to think maybe Jesus is the one that we need, why don't you investigate him? We've got a great course for you to do. It's called 321course.com. You can go to it and binge it in 2 hours, or you can take it over 8 sessions. We've got a chat community as well, all sorts of extra content like FAQ videos, and we would love to see you at 321course.com. Start an account and you can get going straight away. It's completely free. But that'll do us for now. If you'd like to see more of this content, why don't you hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you again on the next one.